This is the Bigger Pockets Podcast, show 152.
You're listening to Bigger Pockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
What's going on, everybody? This is Josh Dorkin, host of the Bigger Pockets Podcast, here with my co-host, the man of the hour. It's Brandon Turner. What's going on, man?
Josh Dorkin. Not much. What's going on with you?
Man, I tell you what, I cannot wait for today to be over.
I've had those days.
Why?
What's going on today?
Because then I don't have to hear you talking anymore about
funny
these
guy.
books.
That's right.
I've been working so hard.
I've been talking a bit about him, haven't I?
You have. You've been working really hard, man. And you know, I don't feel bad at all for that. Oh my God, I worked such a long day. Yeah,
I know.
Okay. Cry me a river, buddy.
It's gonna be good. It's been a few long days, but it's gonna be all worth it. So
It is. All right, man. Well, we have a very, very different show today with a very unique format that's unbelievable. And this thing,
the conversation was so high level, yet still like really good for everybody. I don't care if you have 1,000 units or you've got 0 properties. So good.
Exactly.
Well,
anyway, so today we've got an unbelievable show. And before we get into it, we do have a few things to talk about, and let's just kind of get this thing going.
Yeah, let's get to it. So we're going to talk about actually 2 new books that we just released on Bigger Pockets. However, if you don't care about books or you don't like reading or you don't want to read about rental properties, go ahead and skip forward to the 8-minute mark or so on this podcast, and you don't have to listen to us talk about it. But if you want to listen, let's talk about it. So basically, we officially launched the book on rental property investing and the book on managing rental properties. So today is the official podcast launch day. So today's podcast launch day.
Yes.
It is today.
It is. All right. So the first book, the book on rental property investing, you authored that. The second book, the book on managing rental properties, was authored by yourself and Heather Turner. That would be Bride of Godzilla, otherwise known as your lovely wife. She did. So tell us really, really quickly, what are the books and what's the difference between them? Because some people might say, oh, well, why do you have these 2 books and whatever? So
sure.
Tell me the deal.
All right. So, there's a book on, rental property investing and the book on managing. So there's 2 of them total because we originally released, 3 years ago, Jay's book? Was that something like that?
It was about 3 years ago, the book on flipping houses and the book on estimating rehab costs.
Exactly, yeah. So 3 years ago, we released that, and it was huge. People loved it. Everyone who wanted to flip houses learned a ton, and a lot of people have found a lot of success from that. And then last year, we released the book on investing in real estate with no and low money down. Also very, very popular. It's done very, very well. But ever since then, everyone's been like, people love those books, but the vast majority of our audience, they don't necessarily want to go out and flip houses for the rest of their life. What they want is financial freedom. They want to be with their kids more. They want to travel more. They want to retire early. They want all those things, in life that come with passive income. And we didn't have a book on that. So that's where kind of these 2 books were born out of.
Nice. Yeah. And, the Bigger Pockets audience is probably, I think it's a little higher than 60% focused on buy and hold.
Yeah.
So it just makes sense that we did this. All right. So like I said, we got these 2 books. It was originally going to be one. So how did they kind of end up getting split apart here?
Sure. So actually, it started out as one book. My wife and I sat down and we're like, we should co-write a book on on buy and hold rental property investing. So we did that and we sat down, outlined it, and then we realized very quickly that rental properties is actually 2 completely separate yet connected things. And that is the real estate business, the acquisition and the planning and in the big picture. And then it's the management part. And look, if you don't have both those things, I'm a firm believer, if you don't have both those things, nailed down, you're going to have a hard time succeeding. For example, you could be really good at finding deals, really good at that. But if you don't manage correctly or manage your manager right, you're going to fail. And if you're really good at managing, but you're terrible at finding deals, you're going to struggle and you're probably going to fail as well. So we wanted to, that's how it became 2 complete books. It's over 800 pages combined, 400 pages a piece.
Yeah, so, nice. Yeah, when I opened up the mail and saw it, that thing is an absolute beast. Each of them is a beast, so it's awesome. Cool. So with those books, if you buy them for Bigger Pockets, you can get these videos, these really exclusive kind of videos that we did totally, they're not free. You got to buy the books, but the videos, we put a whole lot of them into the package. So tell everybody really quickly about those.
Sure. So I did interviews with some of my like closest kind of real estate friends, smartest people that I go to for advice whenever I have a question about real estate. I grabbed 8 different guys. Was it Ben Leibovich, Chad Carson, Al Williamson, Brian Burke, Bill Sirius, Kevin Perk, Enrique Jevons, and Serge Shukat. And 3 of them are actually on the show today because like after talking to them, I was like, we need to get them all back on the show and do a big round table. So 3 of those guys are on the show today. And then after that, I filmed a video called The Truth About $30,000 Houses, another one on the mistakes that investors make, and then one more, an hour long of me just analyzing a deal in depth. So there's all those videos. It's like 10 hours or so of video content that comes with it. Oh, and then I almost forgot forms. We included like 30 forms with the thing, 34, I think, 33, 34 forms. Anyway, landlord forms that people can get, and they can download those as well. So,
cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
Anyway, cool.
That's great, man. So, all right, before we get into this, pricing, our typical pricing, we do books at $25 a piece. So tell everybody kind of what the packages are, and then let's just kind of get to this thing.
Sure. So the price is $49 for digital. For both books, you get $49 and all the bonus stuff. Total of 11 videos or something like that. Anyway, and then
a retail value of $2,437.
Yes, these are $9,909. No, anyway, $49 for digital, $69 for print and digital. You get it shipped to your house. However, for people listening to this podcast right now here in December of 2015 when we launched this, if you buy it before December 17th, actually everybody can get $20 off that. So it means it's only $29 right now for the digital. You get both books digital and all the bonus like videos for $29 or $49 for everything, including 2 physical books shipped to your house. But you have to buy before December 17th, and you have to get them on Bigger Pockets in order to get those bonuses.
Right on, man.
There you
cool.
go.
All right, guys, go to biggerpockets.com/rental book. That's biggerpockets.com/rental book, and you can get your hands on it.
Oh,
with that said.
Oh, I forgot.
Really? Yeah.
The audiobook.
Wait,
no,
this is
but wait, the audiobook. So last time I did not record the No and Low Money Down book, the audio, and everyone gave me a hard time because I did not record it. Everyone makes fun of me all the time because we had a Canadian record it, and apparently he says A a lot. So this time, I recorded the book on rental property investing by myself, my own voice. It's 12 hours of audio. Anyway, that's recorded, and we're going to actually throw that in as well for free for anybody who buys before the 17th
That
of
is
this
reason
month.
enough not to buy this package. Who the hell wants to listen
You
to
can listen to me
Brandon
talk for 12
hours.
12 hours. It's not bad.
That's still enough.
Anyway, we're going to sell for $29. You can buy that alone for $29 if you want to, but it's also free if you buy any of the packages on BP before the 17th. So there you go.
Got it.
All that cool stuff.
Done. Shut up.
All right,
Let's
moving
do
on.
This.
Moving
All
on.
right, you guys. We're gonna skip the quick tip. That
was our quick tip.
That was too much. Oh yeah, that was the quick tip. With that said, let's do this. Today's show is going to be amazing. Stay tuned.
Yep.
All right, Ben, Brian, Serge, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the podcast. It is absolutely amazing to have you here.
Hey, how's it going, Josh?
Wonderful weather in Ohio.
Wonderful weather in Ohio. I don't even think that's a possibility. Isn't Ohio either always too hot or too
sun
cold?
Outside. There's sun outside, dude.
Yeah, okay. All right. I believe you. Serge, how you doing, buddy?
I mean,
Doing fantastic.
Good. All right. So as people can tell, we've got 5 people on this podcast. We've never done that before, at least not on a...
Might be a cluster.
It might be, but we're going to get through this because what I wanted to do is we want to do a show on just rental properties, and I wanted to invite the 3 guys that I call when I have a rental property question. Like, these are the 3 guys that I call more than anybody else to discuss issues, and when I want to learn something, these are the guys more than anybody else in the world that I learn from. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to get these 3 on a show and ask them about rental properties. You guys up for that?
Let's do it.
that's interesting. These
Hey,
are the guys
I'm
I
up for
called
it.
too.
What was that, Ben?
But you called, man.
These are the guys I called too.
Okay.
Except for you, Brandon. I don't call you because, like, what would be the point?
You just
But
call me to
these 2
complain.
guys I call.
You called me to complain that Brian won't pick up
Okay,
his phone.
I'm gonna have to be referee. I can tell
Yeah,
how this
that's
is
right.
gonna go. Hey, Ben, Brian, shut up. Let me get to the first question here, gentlemen. First of all, you guys are all, as Brandon said, folks that he turns to, that lots of people turn to. So before we just get into this, I'd love to get an introduction from you guys. So let's start with you, Ben, then we'll go to Brian, then we'll go to Serge. Ben, give everybody about a minute or two about who you are, what's your background, what's your investing story.
I was born in former USSR. I came to America, immigrated to America in 1989. I played violin since the age of 5. I went to top 5 conservatory in the United States at Cincinnati. Discovered I had multiple sclerosis. Was given the diagnosis. Was told not to choose a career that would require fine motor skill. And yet not to do something stupid. So, in that spirit, I went into real estate.
Nice.
Because I didn't want to do anything stupid, so like this seemed logical and reasonable. So I don't do anything in real estate that is not a long-term hold situation in one way or the other, because if I get taken out, I don't want to leave my wife having to unravel stuff. And so, syndication in a partnership whereby there's a chain of command that people wouldn't get stuck is different. Aside for that, it's just long-term holds. I don't do flipping. I don't do sub-twos. I don't do any of that jazz.
Right on. Okay. Right on. Cool. Awesome. All right, Mr. Burke, talk about yourself.
Well, I guess I would say that I'm the anti-Ben. So everything that Ben is, I'm the exact opposite. So I
love you too.
Well, I don't know about that. I started investing in real estate.
Seriously.
Yeah, right, sure. I started investing in real estate about 26 years ago. I've never really been a long-term buy and hold guy. Most of my stuff has been get in and get out. Some of it get in and get out quickly, others not so quickly. It just depends. So I guess when you say buy and hold, that could be defined differently depending upon how the recipient views holding. I think of buy and hold as forever, and I don't do that. So I've done a lot of flips, about 700 of them. I've done a lot of rental property. I've had about 1,000 units at one time or another. I've got just under 1,000 units right now. Most of that is relatively short-term hold, kind of a medium-term, 3 to 5 year type thing. So that's kind of my real estate career in a very short nutshell.
Nice.
The rest of it was all on Podcast 3 and Podcast 76.
That it was. Oh, I didn't mention this. I was going to mention this. This is the first three-peat podcast for anybody, and we decided to do a triple three-peat. So this is a 9-peat. Is that correct?
Yeah,
so
you just did that because I was campaigning to be the first three-peat podcast, and you just couldn't settle this, could you?
Could not settle this without having the.
He didn't want to
three of you
pick
tied.
favorites.
Yep, no favorites here. So, all right. So, Brian, before we get to Surge,
I would have to shoot myself if I got to a third podcast before me. I mean, come on.
Do us all a favor, Ben. I mean,
all right. Before we go on to Surge, I just want to ask because as long as you said this, Brian, why not hold forever? Like we heard Ben's reason for why he wants to hold forever is because if something happens, why don't you want to hold forever?
Well, I just I look at real estate as a series of opportunities, and what you're doing is you're looking for the opportunity and the strategy that's working in any given location at any given time, and that isn't anything that can be held in perpetuity. Things change and climates change. So it doesn't mean I don't hold things forever. I do have about 40 or so rental units that I own personally that I may hold forever and use that as my retirement plan, or maybe not. It's just not a very dominant portion of my business strategy.
Okay, that's cool.
Right on.
And Serge?
I'm probably somewhat of a hybrid of these two guys. Definitely not a buy and hold forever, but don't do a lot of flips. I do longer term flips, anywhere from 1 to 4 years. I buy with a cash flow outlook, with a horizon anywhere from typically 2 to 5 years. Mix between single families, small multifamilies, and medium-sized multifamilies. Right now, I'm focusing on the anywhere between 40 to 100 unit multifamilies, primarily in secondary markets. I love secondary markets that other guys are scared of. I like looking at the riskier properties that people outside of primary markets, primary MSAs that other investors may not see or may not know or would be scared to manage. I try to find my competitive advantage in both managing these properties through my property management company, as well as finding stuff that other guys can't find. I'll purchase maybe one asset a month, sell one asset every 6 months, and just constantly update and keep the portfolio dynamic.
Nice. And what shows were you on previously?
Oh man, I don't remember the numbers. 2 of them.
I think 60, and I don't remember what the other was.
Yeah, something like that. We'll put it in the show notes at biggerpockets.com/show152. We'll link to all your guys' shows, and and we'll probably talk about it in the intro and outro as well of this, I think. So, okay, very cool. So yeah, I like the fact too that you guys all have kind of different strategies of using buy and hold investing or rental properties. You use them 3 different ways, which is kind of cool. So maybe real quickly, can we just ask, just so people listening have an idea of your markets, because your markets are very different as well. I know that. Can you guys give us a quick, 15 seconds? What is your market like? Like, what's a low price house that you would buy, or what's a single family house typically go for, and what's more the, and basically, what's your market like? We'll start with Ben.
In the Midwest, you understand what you're dealing with Midwest. You've got declining population, you've got very low tech coming in, you've got cold weather in the winters. So all you
need to do is move to California, and they'll have a declining population too, Ben.
Yeah, that's right. I'll be the first one.
Which is taking everybody. Actually, I was thinking about this. Arizona is taking Ohio population and California population. The place I need to go is buy a house next to Serge, not Brian.
Good idea.
But in terms of price points, turnkey is very popular in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky area. Because why? Because you can buy a house. I call them pigs. You can buy a pig for $15,000 to $20,000 that you can put some lipstick on, and you can sell to a schmuck from California for $50,000. You can do that in Ohio very, very easily, and you can rent it for $650. The only problem is it's a pig, and the cleanup is going to cost more than $650 a month. So that's Ohio. But interestingly, on a SFR level, the balance is not here, because you can spend $90,000 for a nice 3-2 brick ranch in Ohio, in Columbus, in Cincinnati, in Lima even, that you're going to rent for $800. Or you can buy a pig that you're going to rent for $600. So really, you don't get the spread in the rents, which is why, in my opinion, unless you do cash purchases, or even if you do cash purchases, SFRs don't work well in my market, which is why I focus on multifamily.
Okay. Brian?
Well, I have 2 different primary strategies. My largest focus currently is on multifamily, and I'm looking for properties over 100 units in size. I'm doing that in major Texas metro markets, but I'm also looking at other markets that have a significant, substantial growth story. So, i.e., not the declining population Ben markets. Again, I'm the anti-Ben in that respect. So, I'm looking.
I'm not looking over here either.
So on the multifamily front, primarily just looking for job growth, income growth. Prices in that market are ranging anywhere between $35,000 and $75,000 per unit, depending upon property class and location and so on. On the single family side, I only do that here in Northern California where I'm based. It just isn't worth my time to travel across country for a single family house. So I have bought a number of single family houses in Northern California, and price points here when I was buying them were between $80,000 and $250,000. But nowadays you're looking at $200,000 to $450,000 for pretty much the same houses compared to 3.5 years ago when I was buying them.
Okay.
You guys listening to this, you need to pay attention to the wording very carefully. What Brian just said is when he was buying them 3 years ago. I'm sure we're going to get into that and explore that topic, but you guys listening to this podcast, this is meaningful. This isn't void of, I think, and he knows it. I can see him on Skype and he's smiling. This,
Do you want to just host the show, Ben? I mean, Brandon, why don't we check
what
out?
can I say? I'm a teacher. I can't help myself. I love to teach people this stuff.
That's good.
Nice.
That's good.
No, it's a good
Yeah,
point.
so
This is a
we
good
will
point.
come back to that because I want to
Yeah.
talk about what the current market's like today, investing in rental properties today versus what
Yeah.
it was 5 years ago. But before we do, Serge,
Surge.
what's your market like?
I'm in Arizona, primarily Metro Phoenix. It's a very cyclical market, high population growth, siphoning off a lot of the population from, like Ben said, California and the Midwest. We have a lot of transplants. Population has been growing very steadily for about a little blip during the recession for the past 10 years, one of the fastest growing states in the United States. Houses, again, when I was buying them in the Metro Phoenix, were 40,000 to 100,000 for bread and butter rentals that would rent for anywhere between 700 to 1,400. Today, you're looking at probably a baseline of 90,000 to 250,000 for probably the same rents, maybe $50, $100 higher. Multifamily is going to go for anywhere between $30 to $150,000. We've had a boom in multifamily building. One of the highest growth states as far as units to come online. A lot of Class A buildings coming online, a lot of competition, a lot of investors from all over the United States trying to capitalize on the cyclicality of our market. A lot of people made a lot of money during the recession, but a lot of people are still buying. So story gets very different as soon as you get outside of Metro Phoenix. We look a little bit more like the Midwest. We have counties that populations maybe isn't growing as fast. And prices there, you're looking now at about 45,000 to 100,000 for about $600 to $900 rents.
Okay.
Right on. Right on. So I want to, I want to circle back a bit for all three of you guys. Serge, you kind of touched upon it in your last statement, but we want to kind of look at where the market is today versus in the past. Ben, kind of hinted at that as well. So, first, I kind of want your opinions. You guys are all experts. You guys know this business as well as anybody. What do you guys think the at a macro level is going to happen to the housing market over the course of the next 12 to 18 months? Do you guys see any major political, economic things coming to fruition that are going to affect the markets on a macro scale? And then talk from a micro level, your local market, where do you guys see those markets kind of going over the next 12 to 18? Why don't we start with Serge this time?
I'd say it's a tale of two markets, right? Multifamily and single family, although they're both susceptible to the same shocks, I think multifamily is probably one or two economic shocks away from, I don't want to say a crisis, calamity, or collapse. I don't think it's going to look like it did last time. But I think you have people that are over-leveraged. I think you have people that are getting into asset classes that they've never been in. I think people have gotten very used to low cap rates and low interest rates. I think the market, I don't know where we're at. I don't know if we're in the sixth inning or the eighth inning or fifth inning. You can have that debate all day, but we're moving along on that cycle. There's no doubt about that. And my concern is what shocks can the multifamily sector withstand? So when you talk about shocks, you talk about perhaps it's an interest rate hike. How many points can we withstand? Can we withstand interest rates going up 1%, 2%, 4%? I don't know. But I don't think there's that much. When you look at the cap rates people have purchased under and the loans that they've purchased under, I think in 5 to 7 years, you're going to see a very different story than you are today. The second concern is the amount of building going on. Sorry, Brandon.
No, keep going.
The amount of building going on, particularly in my market and some of the higher growth markets. Even you look in Ben's market, Columbus, Ohio. You look at Houston, Texas. You look at, I was in the Bay Area over the Thanksgiving holiday. Literally every single sliver of land has new multifamily on it. So the amount of units that have come online over the past 3 to 4 years with the easy money, you've got to ask yourself, is there an oversupply of multifamily, and where does that leave the Class A space? And then it all trickles down from the Class A. When Class A gets hit and Class A slowly becomes Class B, what happens to Class B and what happens to Class C? So there'll always be a play for value add, but I think that at this point, really important to get in and know when and where and how your exit's going to look, and not sit there and buy on a blank long-term hold 10-year approach, because I think we're going to be staring at a very different market 5 to 7 years down the road. Single family, a little bit different. Single family is always going to be driven by, FHA, government-sponsored entity financing, and what that looks like. There's been some changes to that. I think that market can withstand a little bit more interest rate shock than perhaps the multifamily can. But I also do see a lot of building going on in single family as well. So in the states where population is going to grow and continue to grow, I think you'll probably be okay. You'll probably get back to historical norms where we're at. If you look at you look at through the recession and where we are now, you're back to 2-3% growth that you've seen regularly. So I think on the single family sector, you're probably just going to hum along. Again, unless there is significant shocks, which I don't know where those are going to come from in the single family. So, and in my market in Arizona, again, it's going to be where is our population? What happens with immigration? Do we still have net inflow of immigration in our state? What's government policy going to look like there? Where are interest rates going to be, and where is building going to be? And obviously the job outlook. So I'm a lot more bullish on single family as far as holding its value, not so much as far as equity growth. And in the multifamily, I would be very, very careful, and I would be sure that I'm buying projects at their intrinsic value rather than at a capitalized value or counting on future rent growth. I would not underwrite future rent growth at this point in time.
Interesting.
There's a lot of really good stuff in there.
Yeah. I'm
gonna let people know you can go back and rewind that and listen again, because I'm gonna listen to that after the show. I mean, everything you just said there, I think was awesome.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to add to that, Brian?
I was gonna say, do you want to add, or do you guys want to kind of take a different angle?
Well, I can take a little bit of a different angle. It is a bit of a challenge to answer the question of what is the market going to do, because I'm a strong believer that there's no such thing as the market. When you're talking about real estate, you have macro and micro, and they can work opposite to one another. And furthermore, when you're talking about single family versus multifamily, those don't track in tandem either. And even within those asset classes, if you're talking rentals versus resale prices, those also don't track in tandem. So it's a little bit difficult to predict, and there's a lot of different movements. And when I mentioned earlier that my strategy was focused on shorter term holds, it's because of all those dynamics and the way that they interplay with one another. It causes me to try to focus on ones where I believe that there's some kind of a trajectory that I can predict. So from that standpoint, looking at just a macro overview of the market, if there is such a thing as the market, I think that we've had a run-up in prices in a lot of areas, and I think that there's some sustainability to that, as opposed to 2005 when it was unsustainable because it was primarily driven by funny loans and whatever else. But now there's some actual fundamentals behind single-family price growth. Now, looking forward, the question is how much sustainability is there for continued growth in pricing on the single-family sector? And in some markets, like California, for example, we've gone up substantially since the bottom of the market in 2008. And if you look at the San Francisco Bay Area in particular, the South Bay, if you ask most people when the peak of the market was, in most places, people would tell you the peak of the market was in 05 or 06. But in the peninsula, South Bay of San Francisco and San Jose area, the peak of the market is now. Prices there are well in excess of where they were in 2006 and climbing. So at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, how much additional runway is there in that pricing relative to the incomes of the people that are seeking to purchase those properties? And without income growth, there's a point where price growth becomes impossible. There is a lot of old money influence in California, so that does have some impact that negates the limitations of income growth. And we are starting to see some income growth. But with this large run-up in pricing, I think we're going to start to see some plateauing, not a drop-off and not a calamity or a catastrophe like some people predict. I think we're going to see a plateau, and that may be true in a lot of metros. On the rent side, on the other hand, there's we've seen tremendous rent growth in a lot of markets, especially California and Texas. Serge touched on whether or not rent growth has continued to be sustainable, and in some areas I think it is. In other areas, it's likely not. Doesn't have much more runway. And as rents grow in multifamily, you say, okay, increasing rent equals increasing prices, but they don't necessarily track in tandem because interest rates influence cap rates. Demand for a sector can alter cap rates. You can have compression and decompression. So with all those factors, it's pretty much a coin toss of trying to predict what's going to happen. But you just have to look at all the nuances of every market and try to find strategies in markets that have a predictable and logical path of success.
I like that.
Wow.
I was going to ask, you mentioned about like how high can, how long will the runway go compared to income, what people can afford in those areas. And especially your area, I like to think about, to me anyway, I could be totally wrong because I'm not in the Northern California area, but I like to think that the massive growth of the tech industry in that area, especially over the last, 5 or 10 years, and these billion-dollar companies that are throwing, $200,000-$400,000 at, developers who are coming out of school 2 weeks. Do you see that? Do you guys worry about that bubble popping, the tech bubble popping, which would then just destroy price values, or is it varied enough that it's not all dependent on that industry?
Well, I don't worry about it day to day because I don't participate in it. I don't invest in the South Bay in those tech-heavy areas. I think that I don't think I'd want to either. I do have some concern that if these companies decide that they could move to Lima, Ohio, and open up all their shops over there, that would dramatically impact both markets if they were to do that. But they're trying to stay where the talent is, and as we know, Ben doesn't have any talent, so they bring him out here.
All right, Ben, your turn. Man. You got to respond to Surgeon Brian's thing. What do you think? Do you agree?
I think it's important to kind of funnel this conversation down to what people can understand. Most people listening to this are probably more concerned about buying a triplex than they are buying 300 units. Okay. And the high-flying what you guys need to understand is, and I'm not talking to you guys, I'm talking to the folks listening to this podcast.
Yeah, Brian was like, yeah, let's hear it, Ben. What do I need to understand?
You have real estate investors. Then you have talented real estate investors. And then you have another level of people with imagination to reimagine what real estate investing really is. I suppose this is true in every profession. That kind of, I'm fortunate to kind of have more of a glimpse than a lot of people into what Brian does, and it's brilliant. I mean, the way that he rationalizes real estate, the way he thinks about it, the way, Arthur Schopenhauer said, talent can hit a target nobody can hit. Genius can hit a target no one can see. That right there is Brian Burke. So, take this show with a grain of salt, because you are not going to listen to every BP podcast and become Burke. Shukad, same thing. I mean, I wrote an article about it like 3 days ago. I mean, how he does what he does management-wise is beyond my comprehension. I don't want to know. So I drive my car, and I'm waiting for my wife, who ran into the store, and a friend and his father drive by, and I happen to be sitting in the Tesla, and they want to look at the Tesla because his father owns stock of Tesla.
Yep, I was waiting for that.
So he gets into the car, and we start talking. And before he leaves, I say, hey, I want to buy all the real estate he's got. And he looks at, because I know he's got a lot of commercial storefront real estate, which at this point I'm interested in. And he looks at me and he says, at my age, I really kind of want to sell all of it, and I want to finance it. That's how real estate bought and sold in small tertiary markets where you guys live where it matters. You know, you don't have to be a superstar. You don't have Brian Burke and Serge Shukat is Hollywood of real estate. It's very difficult to be and do what those guys are. I mean, it's, you know, like Josh Dorkin of the internet. You know, it's very hard. It's very hard. But you don't have to do that. You can, you know, you can tell everybody you know that you want to buy some buildings, that you want to buy a duplex and a triplex and a fourplex, and you can simply retire better than your friends on Social Security. I mean, what do we care what happens to tech sector? At the end of the day, guys, I mean, you know, this is a podcast to launch a book teaching people how to buy real estate, right? We're not teaching them how to buy 300 units. We're teaching them how to buy a flipping, you know, duplex,
Maybe.
right?
I
Well,
agree.
it depends because I mean, you guys are out there doing these things. Lots of people say, hey, I want to just go and buy a house or 2 houses or 3 houses, or they want to figure out what their retirement number, I forget what we call it, the magic number that we, you know, I need 6 houses to replace my income. Okay, great. But then, you know, Bigger Pockets is encompassed of folks who see Brian Burke and Serge and say, I want to do what these guys are doing, not necessarily what Ben's doing, but what Serge and Brian Burke are doing, and it's important. And I think the beauty of this conversation, this is gold right now, by the way. I mean, the amount of knowledge that's coming out is unbelievable. And Ben, your points are very well taken, because there are those people who just care about the duplexes and the 2s and the 3s. So what should that triplex investor be doing then? You know, given your thought or your take on the market, the guy who wants to buy the 2, 3, or 4plex, what should they be?
You have to buy below intrinsic value. I don't care what, when, how, or why. You just cannot be a retail investor ever. Because one of the things I learned from Brian is this idea of underwriting everything you do to the internal rate. There's a lot of reasons to do that, but the most important one is that doing so requires you to project an exit. And that goes back
real quick,
to...
what do you mean by that? For those people who don't know what that means, the internal rate. I mean, I know we can get really deep on that, but what's a good...
internal rate of return is a metric that tracks and times all of the cash flow events. And the biggest cash flow event is the disposition of the property or refinance to get your money out of the property completely. So, you know, Brian is a flipper, and he looks at multifamily real estate as a slow flip, which leads him to understand, to underwrite, how am I going to get out of this thing before anything else? I mean, the most important thing. And I learned that, and it makes a whole lot of sense, because if you can make sure that you discount the worst case scenario and you can buy the thing right so you can get out as you planned, just, I don't care how much you got to discount it. Just discount it enough so that you're guaranteed to get out of it. Then that's the only way to buy. You can't be a retail investor. You can't go out there and capitalize cash flow and think that you're buying anything real. You got to buy value add proposition. You got to buy, you know, you got to buy below intrinsic value. And
so, in other words, you're just saying you got to go out and buy a good deal. You got to hustle to find a good deal.
Yeah, but you got to know how to define what a good deal is. Just because it's cheap doesn't make it a good deal. But to come back to Josh's point, you know, or joke, which wasn't good if you ask me, but you know, what do I know? Listen to what Serge and Brian. There's a big difference between me and Serge and Brian. Like I said, they are, in my mind, this is who I call when I have questions, right? They're superstars. They see things other people don't see. What I am is a guy who discovered I had multiple sclerosis, couldn't play the violin. I don't know why in the world I even became a violinist, but I certainly didn't set myself up for financial success in doing it. And then on top of it, I was told I couldn't even do that. So from there, I get to where I am here, which may not be much, but I don't have a job and I don't need a job, and I drive a Tesla, you know, and my wife doesn't have a job and she doesn't need a job. So you know,
what I like about
it ain't all that, but the point is they can relate to this.
Yeah, so what I like about what you're saying, Ben, I mean, besides the Tesla, is which did you guys? Hey, did you guys hear Ben?
Bomb,
Did you guys hear Ben
it's
got a
the
Tesla?
bomb.
Hey, listen, Tesla. What?
By the
Who's
way, I
buying
will
stock?
say Serge also has a Tesla, and I'm waiting for Brian to
that's
order his. But
I don't need one. I have an airplane. I fly
That's
over
true.
there.
That's true. No, so what I like about what Ben's saying is that, like, there's people that their goal is to become a superstar. There's people whose goal is to become Brian Burke, and other people whose goal is to become Serge, and other people's goal is to become Ben. And that actually changes throughout life too. Originally, I wanted to be Ben. I wanted enough to pay the bills, to have a Tesla maybe, and to to just have that financial freedom. Other people want to actually build bigger wealth. Some people want to build massive financial freedom. So I like that. So Brian and Serge, do you guys agree with Ben on that? I mean, like his you can't be a retail investor. That's the only way to invest today. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with him. It's absolutely true. I've never been a retail investor. I've never bought properties at full market value. It's never been part of my DNA. I think a couple points that Ben brought up that were particularly good, and I say that in amazement because I think it's the first time that's ever happened, is that two things. One,
just tell them that he's brilliant.
Stop talking, Ben. Give him a chance.
So what was I saying? Oh, anyway. So one thing that Ben said in there that was particularly important was the question of why. He asked, why am I going to become a violinist? And then, why did I make that decision? And why did I make this decision to get into real estate? And I think that has a lot to do with this conversation, because when I'm talking about what's happening in an economic perspective, and Ben saying, what difference does that make to the guy that's buying a duplex or a single family? It all comes down to the why. And why would that person choose to buy a single family versus a duplex versus a strip center versus a hotel versus a commercial property? And you've got to think a lot about why you're getting into this business and what your objectives are, because that's the most important question, is why. The second most important thing is to always invest in reverse. You're doing the business backwards. So when you're looking at, I want to get into apartment buildings. Well, the first thing you need to know about the apartment building you're looking at is what's it going to be worth when you go to get out of it. You want to look at that exit and plan that exit, and then work backwards to what you can pay. It's just like doing a flip on a house. If you're going to flip a house, you're going to say, well, the ARV, the after repaired value, is $250,000. It's going to cost me $50,000 to fix it up. So what can I pay for that house to acquire it and still make money? Buying an income property, whether it's a single family rental, duplex, triplex, or 300-unit apartment complex, works no differently than that house flip, where you're looking at what's it going to be worth, what's it going to take for me to get it to a point where it will be worth that, and what's the income stream going to look like in the meantime. And when you put all those components together, that's how you develop your internal rate of return. And that's a complex discussion for another day, but the biggest point is that Ben brought up there is to look at that exit and never buy at retail. And I fully agree with him there. And please don't make me agree with Ben again.
And if I can add, though, because I'm in Lima, Ohio, so I cannot project appreciation. Period. Case closed. And that, my friends, is most of America. The A-class markets isn't most of America. Most of America is secondary and tertiary markets where you have 5 factories, 2 hospitals, and that's the entirety of your economic base. And so how do you project appreciation? You can't. So what do you have to do to guarantee an exit? You have to buy right.
Can we get back to that? Because I want to get to appreciation. That's on our list. Can we just hear from Serge really quickly on answering your other point, and then we'll come back to you guys on appreciation?
Yeah, Ben's point is absolutely right. Yeah, but to get a little deeper into what Brian was saying, it's not just the why, it's know who you are as an investor, right? Who are you? Why are you doing this? I have friends that call me and say, it's so cool, you're looking at multifamily. I want an apartment complex also. Well, I say, my comment is, why do you want an apartment complex? What makes you think you're an apartment complex investor? Why are you doing it? What's your competitive advantage? What's going to make you better than Brian Burke buying in your market, or Ben Leibovich buying in another market? What's going to make you better? What makes you think this is a very competitive market with very low margins? As simple as that, and a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk in these deals. So it's not for everybody, and real estate investing is not for everybody. You see it all the time. Half of the deals that we buy are from people that should have never been real estate investors to begin with. So a lot of people jump into this not knowing who they are. I want to buy single family because I know a guy that killed it buying single family. I know an old man that never had to work for 40 years because he had 20 single family properties. Well, we all know that's not the real story. What makes sense for one guy isn't what makes sense for the other guy. Ben may look at me and say, "You're crazy managing these properties. It doesn't make sense for you." For me, that's where I can compete. That's how I can push my margins, right? And those margins may be good enough for me. That's why I invest in the asset class I invest in. Now, if I didn't have those competitive advantages, I may be a retail strip center investor. Maybe if I was a commercial real estate broker for 10 years and knew that market and had the connections, I'd be that. It all comes down to figuring out who you are, what you're good at, what's your competitive advantage, and then matching that to an asset class that syncs to you, who you are, and realizing that it's not for everybody. You know, the guy with no money in his bank account, I would tell him, you're not ready to be a real estate investor.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brian Burke told me at one point in time, don't play someone else's game. But knowing what your game is about what Serge is just talking about, knowing yourself. And also you need to understand, everybody talks about cycles. Yeah, there are cycles in the marketplace. There are also investor cycles. We all, as we mature, as we achieve, go through cycles. Something that's right for me 5 years ago is absolutely not something I'm going to do today. Yep. And it's very, very, very real.
Right on. Right on. Hey, so I want to go back to what you had talked about before on appreciation. You were talking about you can't predict it. I believe that's true. I believe that you can certainly have educated guesses as you have a market where jobs are increasing, population growth, things like that. The odds of things going better than a Lima, Ohio, for example, or Detroit, actually Detroit's probably appreciating at this point, so I can't use that anymore. But appreciation as an investor. I know we've talked about this separately on all of our the podcasts with each of you guys, but particularly for newer investors, should they be factoring appreciation at all into these deals and opportunities, or should it be something that's just the icing on the cake? Let's start with Brian.
Well, the answer to that question is yes, they should. But the way that they factor appreciation may be different than what you're thinking of. Appreciation to me is something that I can do to create added value to a property. So, for example, let's say I'm going to buy a single-family home as a rental, and this is your approach to how you view appreciation is what separates you and defines you as either an amateur investor or a professional investor, or taking an amateur approach versus a professional approach. So an amateur's approach is to pay full value and it's a buy and pray model. You're just hoping that the market is going to carry your value higher. You're hoping that the rental market is going to carry your rents higher. The professional's approach is one where you're actively involved and you're going in and you're buying the property under current market value because there's some type of a defect. And what you're looking for is you're looking for a correctable defect. And that correctable defect could be bad ownership. It could be physical deficiencies. It could be any number of things that the property needs to bring it to full value. So what I'm looking at when I'm looking at appreciation is, what is that property worth today if I do all of the things that I intend to do? So small scale example, single family house. It looks terrible. It's dirty. It's run down. It's the landscaping, curb appeal are bad.
You're describing Serge's house.
Well, you've been there. And so what you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to improve that. And you're going to make it look nice and appealing to a different renter demographic. So you can predict what that house is going to be worth after you're done. What you can't predict is what it's going to be worth 15 years from now, long after you've done what you're able to do. And that's why one of the reasons why I tend to be more of a mid to short term in my buy and hold strategy, because I know that if I'm going to, let's say on a larger scale, I'm going to do an apartment complex, and I know if I can buy this apartment complex for $10 million, put $2 million in repairs, and sell it for $20 million in 3 to 5 years, that's a darn good deal. And I don't really care what it's worth 20 years from now, because I'm not going to be in it that long, and I can't predict that far ahead. So I'll do what I can predict. I'll take that hockey stick of the income, and I'll get out at the top. And that appreciation is what I built, not what I prayed for.
I like that. Serge, what do you think?
That's awesome.
I'd say it's echo Brian's statement, where you're not looking at what market forces. You're not looking at this asset's going to increase. It's not a stock. It's not going to increase 3% a year, right? I like to look at when we talk about intrinsic value, what does that mean? Factors such as rebuild cost. How much does it cost to rebuild in this neighborhood per square foot? How much are the builders going to build this type of comparable asset for? So if you're buying a single family home and you know that building is going to resume at one point in time, whether it's 5 years, whether it's 10 years, and one thing you can count on is inflation in the cost of materials, right? So you know that building costs are going to go up. So you know you're going to have an exit, and you know that your floor is going to be set by the builders at the very least, right? There's always going to be foreclosures. There's going to be cyclical markets. If you buy cheap enough, you can hold through those dips. If you know that comparable stock costs $100,000 and you can buy that asset for $50,000, and you know that worst case scenario rent is $800, even if it dips 20% and you still have cash flow, that's a pretty safe bet. Right? It's where you're buying at the same $100,000 and you can't afford those dips in rent. That's what you're watching out for, right?
Yeah.
Right on. That's
like
great.
it.
You guys, awesome.
I just want to add in because it's half my show here, so I'm gonna jump in because all right. So here's what I want to say about appreciate a lot of it is going to depend. I know you guys kind of cover this as well, but a lot of it's going to depend on whether or not you include appreciation in there. It's going to depend on you and your goals as well. What I mean by that is when I first started, I was buying these just junky, not necessarily junky, but pretty lower income multifamily properties that cash flowed really well when I was managing it and I was doing my own maintenance, and it all worked really well for me. And those ones will not appreciate. However, today now, I don't need the cash flow anymore. I don't really want the month-to-month cash flow. What I want is long-term wealth. And so I've shifted my strategy over a lot, where lately I've been doing what Brian says. I've been doing more value-add single-family houses where I can add a bunch of equity in. But at the same time, maybe I'm not going to buy a bad deal based on appreciation, but my plan is really, really hoping on appreciation because I'm buying in the best neighborhoods and I'm buying a great deal. And so even if appreciation carries forward at, whatever just the economy takes it, I mean, not even real estate, but just in general, the cost of the dollar going, one direction, my goal again is not cash flow. My goal is long-term appreciation with some of these properties because it's just a different goal. And that might take me 5 or 10 or 15 years. But it's still part of it. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there that, it does depend a little bit on your goals and where you're headed as well as your location. And
how do you predict that, Brandon?
Idea what you just said.
Well, Brandon, you make a good point. You're probably also a lot more realistic on your expenses. You realize that the higher asset class, the reality of owning that, managing that, right, over the long run as compared to your lower end properties where on paper they always look like a home run. When you factor in the lack of appreciation and you factor in the true expenses with the turnover and that class of tenant, right, you get more of a realistic picture. But you got to be in the business for how long before you get that, right? You look at Ben's articles on not buying, C, D class assets.
Yep.
People still argue that, hey, I can manage it better than everybody else, and my expenses, they'll argue you on the cost of a window, right?
When we will launch these books, officially they're coming out here in an hour from when we're recording this. But one of the things I did, I added an hour-long bonus video, and it's called "The Truth About Investing in $30,000 Rental Houses," and it's based on you guys, Ben and Serge. You guys wrote that article a while back, and so I just talk about that concept because it's the things that I learned. Because I used to think that a $30,000 rental house was a great deal. and things have shifted a lot in my mind, and mainly because of you three guys, have shifted it quite a bit. So,
Although I must admit, before Ben outs me, that I do still buy $30,000.
So I might as well, right? So here, like I actually talked about this in that video. Here's my thinking, right? If you want to buy a $30,000 house, great. But I want to buy that house in a location, like I want to buy the house for 30. I want to put 20 into it and have it worth 100 when I'm done. At that point, even if I get no appreciation, it's still worth hopefully 100.
Well, but that's not a $30,000 house. When we talk about a $30,000 house,
Yep.
a pig, we talk about functionally and monetarily obsolescent.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to be that $100,000 house. No matter what you do, you can put gold-plated toilets in there, still a $30,000 pig. That's the essence of a $30,000 pig. What you're talking about is buying below intrinsic value, which is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yep.
Good difference. Well, so Brandon, I mean, you said that you don't want to do it anymore. You're not focused on it. Serge, you said, shh, don't tell anybody. I'm on it. What about the listeners? Should new investors be thinking about these $30,000 houses, or man, maybe I'm going the wrong way with this, but let's go to Burke. You haven't talked about these $30,000 houses. What's your take?
It's like watching a tennis match between Serge and Ben about the $30,000 houses, and who's going to have the stronger point one way or another. I don't know. I've never done it, so I don't really have a really strong opinion. I have bought properties for $30,000, but they certainly weren't worth $30,000. I think there's a difference between buying something at a $30,000 entry and buying something that only has a $30,000 exit.
Yep.
And in the latter case, where it's a $30,000 exit, there may be some additional risk factors at play, because there are fixed costs that aren't a percentage of the sales price or the rent. So that does come in and play a bit of a role. But aside from that argument, because of my limited experience in that market, I'm going to defer to these two guys and let them duke it out.
Well, so let me ask about people wondering about the $30,000 house thing, because it's a very popular topic on BP. Ben's written like 17 articles about it because he knows he'll get like 100 comments every time.
Well, and because people are attracted to it at the end of the day.
Attracted, yep.
Especially newbies. They're like, hey, well, I hear I could buy a house for almost nothing. Let me get into that. It's very attractive.
Yeah, in this bonus video that I did, I asked this question. I said, let me give you guys a hypothetical question. Should you buy a $30,000 house that rents for $500 a month? Because that's what turnkey providers are oftentimes selling. I see in the Midwest is a $30,000 house will rent for $500 a month. And that's almost a 2% rule, right?
That's pretty close.
That's pretty good. I mean, even a $30,000 house for $600 a month,
sure.
That is a 2% rule.
Sure.
Why is that a dangerous idea?
Because of what Brian just said. There are fixed costs involved with running property and owning property for a period of time that happen regardless of what you do on a management side. Things like CapEx, just, things have a lifespan, and once it's up, it's up. And $500 for an SFR just doesn't pencil out. It just doesn't work because of those fixed costs.
And what are those fixed costs? What are you talking about?
Every time you have a vacancy, if you trace that backwards, there's a story behind how that happened, why, how much it costs, and what's it going to cost to fix it. And so a lot of times what I see in TK pro formas is, they'll be nice enough and include a 7% vacancy, but there's never any bad debt. There's never any loss to lease. There's never any, increased fees and in terms of court fees and everything else, because of course you had to evict the bum because they didn't pay. There's never any of that. By the time you really think the story through, the 7% physical vacancy becomes an 18% economic vacancy. And then you have capital expenses, because the fact of it is that a water heater is only going to last as long as it's going to last. No matter how you baby it, eventually you'll have to replace it. And it's not a cost that's a percentage of your income. It's a fixed cost. The water heater costs what it costs. A roof, a window, flooring, you name it. Every piece of that building costs what it does. And by the time you break those out, you understand what it costs to hold the property for 5, 7, 10 years. You don't know when this breaks down. You can try to time to sell it before the next CapEx wave happens. But I don't think that's the wisest thing to do. The wiser thing to do is to be well capitalized so that when things come up, you can afford to pay for it. The problem is on a $500 SFR rental, you cannot afford to be that well capitalized.
Well,
Period.
I can throw in a counterpoint to Ben and then he can fry me and hang me from the tallest tree. But
Let's hear it.
the real estate doesn't just throw off cash flow as an investment. It throws off one more thing, and that thing that real estate investments throw off outside of monetarily is knowledge. And so if you're a new investor who has no experience in owning rental properties and you just absolutely have to get into this business because this is your goal, and the only thing that you can figure out how to get your feet into is a $30,000 pig, as Ben likes to define it, then maybe that's not the worst thing in the world for you, because one of two things is going to happen. You're going to learn some valuable lessons that are going to teach you really why not to do $30,000 houses, or you might have some level of success which produces a result that catapults you into going to the next level and selling that $30,000 house and then buying a $50,000 house and then buying a $70,000 house, and being one that's come from absolutely having not one single dime to my name, literally living off the overdraft protection on my checking account when I first bought my first real estate investment, to where I am today of having bought over $200 million worth of real estate. I didn't get there because I waited and waited and waited until I could get into the ultimate investment that I wanted to get into. I got into something that I probably shouldn't have. It wasn't the greatest deal, but it taught me so much that it allowed me to get to the next level. And you can learn how to do this business from guys like Ben. You know, he's really sharp and he can teach you how to be good. But one thing I've learned in watching a lot of investors over time is that I can teach them everything I know, and they'll listen to about 5% of it, and they'll go do their own thing, and they'll learn their real lessons from their hands-on activity. And, you know, so use Ben's knowledge to get you what you need to know, but you'll learn everything out on the street. And so to that end, I think $30,000 houses may have some place in the investor's repertoire. Just doesn't happen to be in mine.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Or
my early deals, I think all of us could agree to this, that our early deals, probably a lot of them sucked quite a bit. Yet we probably wouldn't go back and change that because it made us who we are today.
That's right.
So, like, I'm not saying go out and buy a bad deal. I don't think anybody here is saying go buy a bad deal, but, you know, don't let your fear of buying that bad deal stop you from ever investing in the first place.
Well,
So
but there's bigger pockets, though. I mean, that's the point. There is bigger pockets. There's Ben Leibovich. There's Brandon Turner. The point is, these guys don't have to lose money like we did in order to learn those lessons. These guys, you know, when I wanted to understand syndication, I reached out to Brian. There was a reason for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I said that, like, I did a webinar a few months ago, and that was like the first line that I put on all the Facebook ads for it, and it just said, you know, yes, you should learn from your mistakes, but the secret is you can also learn from other people's mistakes, if you're wise to do that. And I think that's important, and that's why all of us are pretty open with talking about our mistakes and our issues. We've all done that on separate podcasts, and we've all made them.
Awesome. Hey guys, we're starting to run out of time. So my last question, unless you guys strike up something in me to beg more of you, and I want to start with Serge, is what are the downsides of rental properties? You know, we're doing this podcast today because we've got a couple new books coming out on the business, and you know, it's not all. You know, it's not all roses, right? We've talked about some of this stuff, and you know, I think that's kind of the thing that Bigger Pockets is best at. You know, I think we are the best at being realistic about this business and this conversation so far. I think we need to go and do another 3 hours of this for future podcasts. But what do you guys see as the big downsides of rental properties, particularly again for newer real estate investors? Let's start with you, Serge.
Certainly, if you're managing yourself, dealing with tenants is going to be a challenge. You may not be used to that caliber of person. You know, the lying. You're gonna see all different sides of the human spirit, right? When you're a landlord, if you're not property managing yourself, you're probably not going to be making money. Right when you start out, if you right? So it's the difference between expectations and reality for the real estate investor, especially on the low end. When you grow and you can start to build some scale, like Brian, and build a professional organization, then you can make a corporate environment out of it. But for your average listener that's starting, it's going to be a lot of work for not a lot of money. And I like what Brian said. That $30,000 pig, whether it made you money at the end of the day or it didn't, it bought you an education. And it's better than sitting on the sidelines and doing nothing. The first 3 rental properties I bought, I would never have bought those again. But it taught me my lifelong philosophy of what tenant that I want and what tenant I can make money with. And I build all my purchases based on going after that specific tenant, that specific customer. So you're going to deal with a lot, and it's the numbers are never going to work like you think they are. And you're going to question, why am I doing this? What's the point? And be ready to switch models. Be ready to say, maybe I'm not a buy and hold investor. Maybe I don't got the capital or the skill or the knowledge to manage tenants. Maybe flipping is what I need to do. Right? There's a lot of different strategies, and just be fluid and ready to adapt.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
What do you say, Ben? Downsides of rentals?
I think Serge's point is right on. Be ready to adapt. I'll come back to that. Yeah, I've had a knife pulled on me by a sub. You know, I've had them call me names that I'm going to not mention on this podcast. But you know, when you get in and you don't know the difference between a footer and the rafter, and you know, and you don't have any contacts, you're just shoestringing the whole operation, because this is what your life needs to do right now. It's rough. I mean, it really, really is rough. When you couple that with not having money, which majority of the listeners
Yep.
do not. I mean, if you have a $40,000-$50,000 job, you don't have any money, and a family, you don't have any money. That's just how it is. You just don't have any money. So when you do that and you're looking to creatively finance, I can't. It works. I am the example. I'm not Brian Burke. I'm not Serge Shukat. I didn't take companies public. I didn't, you know, I don't come from a corporate background. You know, but it works. It, you know, but I haven't bought anything since 2013. I shifted my strategy because of my cycle, my investors. I mentioned it before, my life cycle. Yep. So it works, but you're going to have to eat a lot of it to get to a point of stability where your life does what it's meant to do. My back was really to the wall, and I really didn't have any other options. And I was going to succeed no matter what. But had I had a $120,000 corporate job, I don't know if I would have, because I really don't like real estate. I think these guys get off on real estate. I really don't. I don't like real estate. I respect it a lot. I appreciate how powerful it is, what it can do for regular people. But I don't love it. I don't love the chase. I don't get tingly feelings in my legs. I don't, like Chris Matthews, I don't. Yeah, none of that about real estate. None of that, because the numbers never are what you think they're going to be. The tenants never behave like you think they're going to behave. The contractors, that's easy now. I've been around long enough. I hand them the key. They pick up the key off the board and they bring it back and it's done. But it wasn't like that in the beginning. I got a knife pulled on me. So Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
I mean, it comes back to, why are you doing this?
And I got to say, Ben, that's actually pretty brave of you to say that you don't like it. But, you see it as a means to an end, right? I mean,
it's a means to an end.
Yeah,
it taught me so much about what I know. But my story, and it's very logical. I teach now. I have a course and I teach now, and there's a reason for that. And that's because I financed myself up the wazoo in order to get into this real estate. Because when they told me I had a mess, I had not a cent to my name. So I got this job to build a music school for $30,000 a year, and I had nothing. So in order to do this, I decided real estate was going to be it. I had to be very creative. I had to find deals below intrinsic value, but having said that, I financed 100% of those things. What that meant is 3-year balloons, 5-year balloons, 7-year balloons. And do you know what your cash flow really looks like when you've got these balloons hanging over your head?
Yeah.
And when your reputation is on the line, and when my investors have never lost money. I've lost money. My investors have never lost money. But I finally then got to a point where I don't have any more balloons. And I have a stable portfolio. And I take account of my life. And it's that life cycle thing. I take account of my life. And I say to myself, do I want to buy more real estate like I have been in Lima, Ohio? Or is my life calling me to do something else? And frankly, from a place where a doctor told me, I'm not sure how long you're going to be out of a wheelchair, to a place where I am now, people need to know what I know. So I teach. That's what I do nowadays is I teach.
Hey, Ben.
I teach people. And next step is going to be, buying a 40 unit in, beautiful Arizona, buying a house next to Serge Shukat and being done with the whole thing.
I think one thing you said there I thought was really good is that you just mentioned this, like, it is hard, especially when you have no money. It is really hard, and it's stressful. And like I said this before, there's so many nights where I'm up until 3, not so much anymore, but I'd be up until 2, 3, 4 in the morning trying to figure out how do I get out of this, or how do I put this together, how do I get this, and I think that happens. So, like, Brian, would you agree with that? What Ben and Serge have said? Do you have anything you want to add on to that, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do agree with it, and just to specifically answer Josh's question about was that your question, Brandon? I forgot, it was so long ago.
The downsides of rental property.
Yeah, the downside of rental property. I think that the biggest downside of rental property is that it can fail to meet your expectations. So I think it's very important for people when they get into this business to realize it is what it is and realize it for what it is. In 2004 and 2005, I remember people at real estate club meetings talking about how, oh my gosh, my plumber made $100,000 on this house he bought as a rental, and it's gone up that fast, and I'm going to buy a bunch of rental houses, for $450,000 at rent for $1,500 a month. Good luck. And then the market tanks. And so those folks, their expectations were not met at all because they bought at such a high basis. The market went down. They were underwater. They were in negative cash flow because they thought they could accept negative cash flow because the appreciation would bail them out, and that didn't work. So I think people have to realize that this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not even a get-rich-quick business. And have the proper expectations going in, or the downside will be that it won't meet your expectations. If you properly set your expectations from the outset, then the downsides are exactly what Ben and Serge outlined.
Right on.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, you guys have talked about some real scary stuff. It's very negative, really, like awful. Like I never want to buy a rental property. Actually, a lot of people are probably sitting and listening and saying, wow, this is scary. So I want you guys to flip it around. Let's keep it to one sentence per person, and then we're going to let Brandon close up the podcast. So why, given all the negatives, should somebody be investing in real estate? Ben?
Because nothing else can do, ultimately, if you can sustain the heat, nothing else is going to answer the call like real estate can.
Cool. Serge?
It's the fastest way to control your path to building wealth. Every other aspect, every other investment, you're putting your money, you're betting on somebody else, you're betting on something else. Real estate, you're betting on yourself.
Love it. Love it. Brian?
I would say that everything those two guys said is absolutely true if you educate yourself and learn how to do it. And the one thing that's great about real estate is you can learn how to do it properly. And I think that that's part of the reason why you're doing this podcast is to teach people this business. And there's books, there's podcasts, there's Bigger Pockets, and people need to leverage that and use that knowledge in order to get the result Ben and Serge just outlined.
Awesome.
Love it. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to take us out because we've had each of you guys on the show before twice, so we don't need to do another famous 4. I'm going to condense this down to a famous 1. So your famous, each of you guys get to answer your favorite famous 1. All right, the question is, what is the best real estate book you've read written by Brandon Turner in the past month? Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. All right. But the question actually is, what if you guys could give one final tip, just one final tip for those listening today who are maybe, one quick tip that you give people that are listening who are maybe they've never done a single deal, or maybe they've done one or two deals, like real, I don't know how to say complete newbies, but newbies, or just, they haven't done a lot. What's the one tip you would give them, just encouragement going forward in their business? Why don't we start with, I don't know, anybody want to take it? Raise your hand. Anybody? Ben will take it.
Ben will take it. I say buy quality. I know what Brian said about the pigs. I understand the sentiment, but we're at the top of the market. The spreads are very narrow. Mistakes are very painful. Reverse is very fast. Buy quality. Buy something with a lot of aspects of desirability that people will want, have wanted in the past, want it now. They, for some reason, will want it in the future. Don't think you're going to take something and make it appealing to people. Buy something with a proven intrinsic record of why it's quality. It could be mismanaged, but it's still quality. What it is, where it is, it's quality. Stick to that, you should be fine.
Okay, I like it.
I'll take the next one. Is my advice would be to align yourself with someone that has the knowledge or experience that you're in the field that you're trying to get into. So if you want to buy single-family homes and you don't know anything about buying single-family homes, get to know somebody that owns single-family homes, whether that's going to your real estate club, hanging out on the forums at Bigger Pockets, moving in next door to Ben Leibovich and assaulting him every time he gets out of his car to walk into his house, whatever it may be. Try to find somebody that you can learn the knowledge that you don't already have. That would be mine.
Yeah,
I like it. All right, Serge.
I would second that. Invest in yourself first and foremost. Before looking to buy a $30,000, $50,000, or $100,000 house, it's irrelevant what you buy. You're going to fail if you didn't invest in yourself first and foremost. And getting to know who's doing it in your community, that's part of that process. You'll probably find out if you want to be a single-family investor and you hang out with a guy like Ben for a month, you'll probably come to realize, hey, I don't want to be a single-family investor. I don't want a life like Ben, right? Or you might say, that's exactly what I want to do. But invest in that first before you figure out, before jumping into something. Invest in yourself, invest in your knowledge. Find out who you want to be and why you want to be that.
I love it. And why don't I ask you the same question, Josh? Since we don't ever get to ask you because you're the host, why don't we ask you the question? What's one piece of advice you want to give people about getting into rental properties?
I think I'd just parrot what these guys are saying. I get asked the question every day. I get emails, I get private messages on the website, and what I tell them is pretty much the same. I'd say, get out there, learn what it is that real estate is, learn what your options are, learn what the possibilities are, build up at least a base of knowledge. Now, there's a point when there's only so much you can learn before getting out there and doing it. And that's been parroted by guest after guest on this show. So, you want to learn, you want to get the base of knowledge, know enough to not do what I did, which is just go in blind, assuming you know enough, and go and make every damn mistake in the book. Do not do that. That is just a terrible idea. I don't care if you go to MIT or Harvard and you're, sharp as a tack. It doesn't matter. That's not going to make you successful. It's understanding the business that's going to make you successful. So at least get the rudimentary understanding of the business. A few resources would be our Bigger Pockets Ultimate Beginner's Guide, listening to this podcast. There's countless other ways, but those are the two ways I like to tell people. And then at some point, and I can't tell you what that point is, but you have to figure it out. At some point, you have to pull the trigger. You got to get out there. Yeah. You got to be analyzing deals. That's part of the education process, but you got to eventually go and pull the trigger. And it's going to be scary, and you're not going to know completely what you're doing. You're not going to have 100% of the knowledge that you need to go ahead and do that, and that's okay. And you will make mistakes, and that's okay, because everybody here has made mistakes and will continue to make mistakes. So just keep that in mind, know that, and go ahead and do it. And listen, at the end of the day, it may not be for you. You may try single family, may not be for you. You may try multi, may not be for you. Real estate, after trying everything, may not work for you at all. And that's fine. There's something else that might work for you. But you got to give it a shot. And so that's my long, short answer.
Nice. Cool. All right. Shall we get out of here?
Let's do this. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Serge, Ben, Brian, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. We really, really do appreciate it. You guys are all 3 for 3. Sorry, Ben, you're not the first. But thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
All right, guys. That was Ben, Brian, and Serge. Absolute all-stars in the Bigger Pockets world. These guys they're all-stars just in the world in general, man. All really, really, really smart folks, fellas, and we love having them as part of our family. We love having them as part of the Bigger Pockets community. They really give so much of themselves to everybody at Bigger Pockets, and so we really do appreciate that. What a show, man. Mind blown. Want to go back and listen up and learn a thing or two, man. I got schooled.
Yeah, I know. I every time I talk to these guys, like, my brain hurts afterwards. And that's why I try to make it a point to talk to them, right? They say talk to people who are smarter than you.
Yep.
These guys are smarter than me.
Well, that wouldn't be hard for you.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Well, let's get out of here. But one more time, Josh, we want to tell them where you can find the books.
BiggerPockets.com/rental book. That's BiggerPockets.com/rental book. Check it out. Also, guys, thanks so much. We got lots of great podcasts lined up for you in the next coming weeks. So definitely stay tuned and be safe out there during this holiday season. Let's get out of here. I'm Josh Dorkin, signing off.
You're listening to Bigger Pockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.